Good evening, one and all. How good it is to see you. Welcome to the Wine Centre in Paisley. Welcome to what we call the Paisley Weekend, sometimes known as the Glasgow Weekend, sometimes known as the Summer Weekend. Take your pick. Welcome, one and all. It is my great honour to welcome you all here to the Wine Centre, and all of you online also. I gather we have a number of people online. Part of my little delay tactic is that I think a number of people are still trying to find the link and to get online, but with expert help on my left here, that is happening. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome Josie Gwynn as our 2026 Iona Community Lecturer. Josie, you're so welcome. Josie and I met about a year and a half ago, we think, a cup of tea on the Mound in Edinburgh, and you began sharing with me the story of your research. Josie is a PhD researcher at the University of Edinburgh School of Divinity into the theme of resilience. And with Scott, who is also here. Welcome, Scott. Scott and Josie, you are co-founders of the Resilience Resource, which you can find online, should you want to explore what that resource is. We are particularly delighted, Josie, to have you here because the themes of resilience and faith and the intersection with faith communities is intriguing for us. You have been doing a little bit of a deep dive into the Iona community and how we might be, I guess, a bit of a guinea pig. We look forward so much to hearing what you have to say about not just the findings, but the wider concepts that you've been exploring. Friends, I give you Josie Gwynn, our 2026 Iona.
Well, thank you all. It's such a privilege to be with you here tonight. There's some familiar faces in the room, some people that I've had the privilege of getting to know over the last couple of years of my research, and others that I'm just meeting tonight for the first time. But I just really want to say thanks to the Iona Community, to Ruth for inviting me to give the annual Iona Community Lecture. It's really an honor to facilitate this time together. So as Ruth mentioned, in addition to my PhD research, my husband and I, my husband Scott, are part of a charity team called the Resilience Resource. And the Resilience Resource provides crisis care and resilience building tools for individuals, communities, and organizations that are impacted by or responding to crisis and disaster around the world. So I have the privilege in that my research informs my work and my work informs my research. So as part of that work, I just have had the honor of observing different groups and communities in different cultural contexts. And I just became curious. These are in crisis and disaster contexts. What is it that helps a community remain together, remain resilient, even though they're going through maybe some of the most difficult days and seasons of their lives? What about their spiritual rituals, their faith practices, their relational capacity, maybe their group identity, maybe even their social power dynamics? What about those things affects the development of their community resilience, which is what led me to this research. So more specifically, I'm examining the effect of hierarchy or power over dynamics and holism or power with dynamics in the rituals and the collective practices of faith and spirituality of a group and their effect on community resilience. So tonight is going to be a bit more of a conversation than a lecture, which hopefully will be a relief. And we'll be integrating a group discussion and then even an opportunity for you to join the conversation later on in the lecture, and then we'll have some Q&A at the end. Hopefully some collaborative, interactive Q&A at the end. So to that end, we're going to jump right into a group activity. We're going to talk a little bit about, with each other, about what brings a community together. So Scott's going to have our mic, but before he provides an opportunity for you to share, maybe in just pairs, if you could just turn around maybe to two other people behind you, so you're creating a group of like 3 or 4, and maybe spend just about 3 minutes, and I'll set the timer, coming up with a list of everything you and your group of 3 or 4 have in common. So think of absolutely everything that you can come up with that you share in common with each other. So go ahead and do that now. I'll set the timer for 3 minutes, and then we'll come back together and have a wee bit of a chat. I just forgot to give instructions to the online crew. So for those of you that are online, you may not be with people that you can create a list of commonalities with. So maybe think of 1 or 2 people that you're really close to, and think of everything that you share in common, and just jot that down on a piece of paper or maybe a note on your computer, and you'll have an opportunity to share that later. Okay, you've got about 30 seconds. Okay, that's the end of our 3 minutes. I'd love to just have maybe 2 groups share, if you're willing, maybe your top 10 commonalities. Is there anybody that would be willing to be the spokesperson for a group that would be willing to share their top 10 commonalities? I see somebody pointing at somebody in the back. Are you willing to share your top 10 commonalities? I think you've been voluntold.
Yeah, I think we're all deeply concerned about the climate. We see ourselves as open to change. Do you want 10 of these? You really want 10 of them?
Depends on how quickly you can read 10.
It'll get boring if it's all about us.
Okay, 5.
Yeah, so those are our 2. We're concerned about the climate and we're open to change.
Those are your top 2. Okay. Anybody else? Okay.
We discovered we all speak a second language.
Oh?
Shared values, because we're part of the Iona community, so that's a given, I think, in a way, I hope. We all liked Asian food this evening. Well, I think that's important. Food is one of the things that's really important. Any more? Oh yes, all white. Yeah, all ministers.
All ministers, okay. Anybody else willing to be a spokesperson for your group? And if anybody online wants to share your commonalities, you can pop those in the chat. We'll have somebody read those out.
Oh, I can't. Got to get my glasses out. So. We have just common humanity.
Okay.
We have a common cause. Those are 2 from online right now.
Okay, thank you for sharing those online. So we have commonalities that we share with other people in the room, right? Things that we can identify that we have, that we share together. So we're going to break into our groups again. And this time, I want you to talk about something that is unique about you that nobody else in your group shares. What is something that's different? It can be an experience, it can be a trait, just something that sets you apart from everybody else in your group. So we'll give you about 3 minutes to do that, and then we'll come back again together. About 30 seconds. 30 seconds. Okay, let's come back together. Anybody interested or willing to share their unique difference? I've got quite a few fingers pointing over here. Been nominated.
Well, at risk of being slightly topical with the World Cup going on, I think I'm probably the only person here who's trodden on Cristiano Ronaldo's foot.
Ah. So usually we ask if anybody else in this room shares that same experience. Has anybody else trod on Cristiano Ronaldo's foot? I think that's definitely a unique experience. Anybody else want to share? I've got one of... You may have to save the backstory for the Q&A.
Well, in our group, we've definitely got one and only bassoon player and one and only tenor horn player.
Okay, there you are. Anybody else in the room a bassoon or tenor horn player? Okay, those are unique experiences.
I was in the football stadium in Soweto when Nelson Mandela was released from prison.
Wow, that is quite a unique experience. There's no question. Is there anybody online that has shared a unique experience? Or aspect of difference, unique difference?
So much. One person said, I am Buddhist.
Okay.
Unique.
There you are.
One person said, I love composting, have a pile of books I want to read, and a spinal condition.
Okay.
And one person said, I have an archaeological time perspective, using embroidery as a spiritual practice.
Oh, very unique. So as you can see through this little exercise, commonalities bring us together. But it's the differences that we have, our unique aspects, that generate that richness and depth in community. Depth of community emerges from an ongoing negotiation of commonality and difference. And when a community can hold an ethos of welcoming difference, that community will continue to grow. They'll grow in breadth and depth because they're welcoming to people who are different than they are. Resistance to difference results in uniformity, which eventually causes the collapse of a community. So we're going to talk a bit more about differences later on, but first let's talk a little bit about what happens when commonalities bring us together. And to do that, we're going to go to the field of sociology. Sociology is just a big word that means the study of society, or groups of people gathering together doing various activities. And in the early 1900s, a sociologist by the name of Emil Durkheim theorized that commonality in religious practice, or religious rituals, is actually the underlying glue of society. He theorized it was religious rituals and spiritual practices that created social order and moral conscience, a sense of connectedness and belonging. He explored how shared religious or social rituals generated a sense of a highly charged emotional state, what he actually called collective effervescence, which I'm not really going to refer back to, but is just fun to say. So as an example of this, maybe think of a time when you gathered with a few other individuals or maybe even a larger group for a religious practice or a ritual of faith and spirituality, maybe a song service that was particularly meaningful, maybe a time of prayer or meditation, perhaps even like a work project or an advocacy effort. And you felt that sense of energy, that sense of kind of enthusiasm when you left that space. You felt perhaps maybe connected to others as you participated in that activity. In the 1980s, a sociologist by the name of Randall Collins built on Durkheim's theory to consider how the interactions between individuals, the kind of everyday things that we experience as we cross paths with other people throughout our activities, generate an emotional energy. So he took Durkheim's theory of kind of structured ritual practice and carried that over into paying for the till for our groceries, or standing at the bus stop with somebody else, or sharing a coffee with a friend, or having a family meal together. And he theorized that those also generate an emotional energy. If they're successful, they generate significant emotional energy, which then contributes to our feeling of connectedness to other people. He found that these interaction rituals actually contained ingredients that could be measured. Those ingredients are co-presence. So Collins theorized that physical co-presence is necessary. Additional theory has kind of expanded that to include remote presence, so just co-presence in general. Collins was theorizing before kind of the advent and explosion of the internet and digital connections. A shared focus was an important ingredient. So the groups that were together needed to be focused together on something. They also needed to be experiencing a shared mood. And then there needed to be some kind of group boundary. So by definition, this lecture is an interaction ritual. We are all co-present in a room. We have a shared focus, hopefully not just me, but each other. Hopefully we have a shared mood, relatively relaxed, maybe curious. We have a group boundary. We're together in this space. You had to register online to participate in this lecture. So even those that are online are also a part of this interaction ritual because they're co-present with us through a digital medium. Successful interaction ritual chains generate, like I said, this emotional energy. And even though the word emotion is used, it's actually more of a holistic concept of energy, because it's not just limited to our emotions. And as we know, we feel our emotions in our body, and we have a connection between our emotions and our mind. So it's really a holistic sense of energy that's generated. Successful interaction rituals also generate sacred symbols. This can be as simple as an inside joke or in-group language. Certainly as the Iona community, you have different words that you use that everybody in the community recognizes what they mean. Perhaps it's something like the hallowing ceremony. Somebody outside the community would have no idea what a hallowing ceremony is, but within the community, you know what that is. And if you're a new member who's just finishing your 2-year process, you're quite familiar with what a hallowing ceremony is and looking forward to it. This lecture itself will create in-group language. You'll leave this lecture knowing what an interaction ritual is. You'll have some idea of what collective effervescence means and maybe try to use it in a sentence. A group's ritual practices or the mission, vision, and values of an organization can become sacred symbols. A sacred symbol can be more tangible, like the colors of your favorite football team, which is highly applicable right now. Go Scotland in the World Cup. Anything can become a sacred symbol depending on how the individual and community define it. So as noted through the exercise we just did, individuals are drawn to others, form communities through commonalities, which then creates opportunities for these interaction ritual chains to occur. Every ritual occurs through a commonality that draws people together. And we can generally sort rituals into what we kind of call the big R rituals. The sacred rituals, church services, worship services, maybe even social events like weddings or festivals, regular community events, football games. In the US, where I'm from, graduating from high school is a ritual. It's a rite of passage. It's something that the community gathers around. Small R rituals would be kind of those daily interactions. Examples might be, like we've listed already, perhaps coffee with a friend or working together on a common project. So as Collins theorized, this emotional energy or holistic energy is either generated or depleted through these experiences. So if the interaction ritual is successful, emotional energy will be generated. We'll feel connected to others. We'll feel part of a group. We'll feel like we belong. If it fails, we will have our emotions, our emotional energy depleted, which then leaves us withdrawing or maybe feeling disconnected or isolated. Emotional energy can even, or an experience of emotional energy can even extend an experience of belonging past the time that that event occurs. Who here has ever been a part of some kind of activity where you just left that going, that was so amazing. And that feeling of amazingness lingers into the days and weeks that follow because it was such a meaningful experience. So why does it matter what we think about big R rituals and little r rituals, the interactions we have with everyday life, each other in everyday life? Because it turns out that social power dynamics play a big role, if not the primary role, in how rituals succeed in generating emotional energy that leads to connectedness and belonging. And it also informs how they fail. And connectedness and belonging are primary factors in individual and community resilience. And if interaction rituals fail, leading to disconnectedness, isolation, loneliness, those are also primary factors that undermine community resilience. So we'll talk a bit more about the role of power dynamics and interaction rituals here in a bit. But first, let's talk about the role of power dynamics in the differences of groups or communities. So there's an organizational theorist in the early 1900s who, ironically, because she was a woman, did not have her theories become a prominent place in organizational culture theory until close to the end of her life or after her death, which is quite unfortunate because she has a lot of very wise things to say about communities and organizations. She said, as long as we think of difference as that which divides us, we shall dislike it. When we think of it as that which unites us, we shall cherish it. Our differences generate conflict. They just do. And our exercise already demonstrated, right? We have commonalities in this room. We have differences in this room. And our differences have the potential to generate significant conflict, depending on what those differences are. And while it might be tempting to lean towards getting rid of conflict, as we think of pursuing unity, Follett has this to say: what people often mean by getting rid of conflict is getting rid of diversity. Because in order to get rid of conflict, we have to get rid of our differences. It is of utmost importance that these not be considered the same, she says. We may wish to abolish conflict, but we cannot get rid of diversity. We must face life as it is and understand that diversity is its most essential feature. Fear of difference is dread of life itself. Fear of difference is dread of life itself. Follett theorizes there are three ways of dealing with difference: domination, compromise, and integration. Through domination, only one side gets what it wants, right? Power over control. They determine, dictate what happens. Through compromise, really neither side truly gets what they really want. It's only through integration that both sides get what they want or need. And she describes domination and compromise as actually a coercive resolution of conflict. And they're that way because they both require that something be suppressed. In domination, the wants or the needs of the other side are completely suppressed. right? They're set aside in favor of the one that's in control, the one that's dominating. In compromise, both sides have something suppressed. Both sides have to set aside something that they might want or need in order to resolve the conflict. And unfortunately, when conflict, or when wants or needs are suppressed, future conflict will always arise, because that suppression will come out somewhere in the future. Follett considers integration as co-creative. Integration allows both sides to collaboratively come together and create something new, something that meets the wants or needs of all parties involved. And this matters because depth of community connectedness, belonging, relational growth, depends on how conflict arising from differences is handled. If differences can be valued enough for all sides to integrate and collaboratively create something that meets everyone's needs, successful interaction ritual chains occur, leading to connectedness and belonging, group cohesion. If there's an attempt to compromise, dominate, reject differences, suppression and marginalization will occur, greatly increasing the risk of interaction ritual chain failure, which leads to disconnection, isolation, and loneliness. So let's take a look at how power dynamics affect rituals. Follett explores two types of social power dynamics, what she calls power with, which is a coactive, collaborative form of power where people work together to accomplish shared objectives or goals. I heard earlier in our exercises, I'm sure you did too, common values was shared as a commonality. That's an expression of working together towards something that everybody values. When shared objectives and goals are worked on together, it expands the total power of the group. Everybody has an opportunity to give voice. You could call this holistic power because it integrates all parts of the whole. But power over or hierarchy is what Follett calls a coercive power, where one person or group exerts control and dominates over another. And how power is wielded within a community affects the success or failure of ritual practice. Rituals mandated or dictated through power over or coercive domination risk unwilling participation, which then erodes emotional energy, leading to ritual failure and eventually disconnection from community. An example of this is at a former workplace that my husband and I were employed at. It was mandatory for all employees to participate in the morning devotional and prayer time. We had to badge in with our employee badges. It didn't matter if we didn't fully agree with what was occurring in that religious ritual. It didn't matter if we had something going on and didn't feel like we were in a place to be able to practice a religious ritual or spiritual practice. We were mandated to be there, even if we didn't fully believe. That's a power over religious ritual, where it's demanded that you comply with a specific type of structure. Successful belonging-generating ritual practice requires agency from participants. It's a co-creative, voluntary, relational engagement. This is power with. Power with religious ritual practice is invitational. Totally different experience if that time of devotional rituals or worship time was invitational and not mandatory. They're inclusive, they're diverse, they're collaborative. Examples of a power with community ritual might be a shared meal where everyone contributes a dish, a song service where everyone is invited but not required to lead, a community project where everyone's voice and perspective directly contributes to the outcome. And it turns out that when connectedness and belonging are generated, group belonging occurs, that that is a tremendously important aspect of group resilience. Communities that have repeated successful interaction ritual chains generate emotional energy that then continuously feeds into the group's relational connectedness and experiences of belonging, drawing people to return to that group, making other people curious about that group, wanting to participate in that connectedness and belonging, which then contributes overall to the community's resilience. So let's pause for a second to talk about resilience. It's a bit of a buzzword, right? You hear it everywhere. No matter if you're talking about the climate or how resilient your garden is with the weather changes, or psychosocial resilience, which is our psychological emotional component. So maybe let's just take a few moments to think in one or two words, how would you describe resilience? Scott has the mic. Maybe just pop your hand up, and as you think about the concept of resilience, what comes to mind for you? Yeah.
Whatever you're facing.
Being able to cope with whatever you're facing. It's a key aspect of resilience. Yeah.
For me, it's finding ways to constantly adapt to things that are changing around us,
Yes.
and finding the best ways to integrate that into our everyday lives.
Hanging in there, just keeping on, keeping on.
Keeping on, keeping on. Anybody online have thoughts about what words come to mind when you think about resilience? And while we're waiting, we can maybe take one or two more from the audience as well.
Inner strength.
Inner strength, yes. Rob?
It's experiencing community in difficult situations.
Okay.
It's also the ability to withstand tough times. And the ability to bounce back.
Okay.
Remaining psychologically and spiritually grounded through tough times.
Mm-hmm. We've got one more.
I was thinking of nature, the way that nature can bounce back when much of it has been destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
Resilience there in nature.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we see that frequently, nature. Okay, we'll take this last one in the back.
I think it's also something about resisting being deformed by events.
Mm-hmm.
So able to recover either the shape you had or something that you're happy with afterwards.
Mm-hmm. Those are all really important elements of resilience. And even as you listen to the range of expressions of what people think of when they think of the concept of resilience, you could hear that as a continuum, different components coming into play. That's what's made it so tricky for the different fields of research to study resilience, because there are so many different elements or factors or dynamics that contribute to resilience. In fact, resilience researchers haven't been able to come up with a common definition because there are so many different factors. And it really depends on your approach of how you're studying it or the lens through which you happen to be viewing resilience. But some of the lenses that most directly apply to my research and the aspects of communal resilience that we're considering through the course of this evening and through my work and others' work is the type of resilience that resilience researcher Anne Maston refers to as ordinary magic. And she referred to it this way because she really wanted to set resilience apart from some of the research that had demonstrated it as maybe kind of unique traits or characteristics that people had, which then made it challenging for people who didn't feel like they had those traits or characteristics to feel like they were resilient. But through the course of the multiple decades of Anne Maston's work, she came to discover that resilience is actually built in the everyday ways that people and communities adapt to, restore from, and even flourish through crises. While individuals have historically been the focus of resilience, which has made it a bit challenging to look at community resilience, one or several researchers now, but one primary researcher, Michael Unger, emphasizes that resilience isn't only something we carry as individuals. His research determined that it's actually something we build between us. We cannot be resilient alone. It relies on community, it relies on relationships, it relies on shared values, daily rhythms of care, all of those things that interweave us together as we go about our daily lives. And individual and communal resilience is reciprocal. So individual resilience is drawn from those networks of relationships and rituals that stabilize us, maybe even reorient us when experiences of life overwhelm us. But communal resilience, if impacted, can affect the resilience of an individual and vice versa. If an individual's resilience is greatly depleted, an individual or a community can build them up, or a community can contribute to that depletion. And faith beliefs and religious practices play a really powerful role. They inform and shape resilience factors such as meaning and purpose, realistic optimism, which is just a big phrase for hope. And they provide moral and ethical guidance. They contribute daily coping skills, meditation, prayer, reading sacred texts, gathering together for communal service. So as I went about the course of my fieldwork through a case study of the Iona community, it was really interesting to me that the relational ritual practice within the community continued to be highlighted as an irreplaceable aspect of individual and community resilience, affirming the work of other researchers, but also emphasizing that the central aspect of relational ritual within the community, the rule of life, as an example of a collective relational ritual structure practiced over time, a voluntary ritual relational accountability chosen by members and associates, generates significant communal connectedness and belonging. Participants affirm this is because they feel like it's a holistic ritual integrated into all of life. It's a flexible yet bounded structure that encapsulates the other interaction rituals that also contribute to cohesive connectedness and belonging. And while it's a non-negotiable aspect of membership, that flexibility, adaptability contributes to its co-creative aspects. In that as the rule is practiced, it's informed by how it's practiced and how people advocate for changes in its practice over the 9 decades of the community's history. The rule of life structures and integrates all 4 of Collins' conditions for successful interaction ritual chains: co-presence, shared focus, mutual mood, group identity boundaries. Through a holistic emphasis on continual, reciprocal, mutual accountability for individual actions, respectful interactions with others, consistent, inclusive faith practices and spiritual rituals, and advocacy for and stewardship of the earth, the rule integrates the conditions that make successful interaction ritual chains possible into all aspects of the community's life. Now, no community is perfect. No practice is perfect. Just because it integrates the conditions, it's up to each individual for those successful interaction rituals to be generated. But the power of ritual is that it reminds us of what we have in common. And it can affirm that differences are valued, depending on how the ritual is practiced. A shared ritual practice, like the rule of life, within common life, creates a binding thread. And in the case of the rule, it creates a binding thread that connects to the past, because the rule of life has been practiced since the beginning of the community's history and has adapted co-creatively over all 9 decades to its present aspect now. Creates a binding thread connecting the past to the present and connecting the community together for the future. So while this is an example of a relational ritual practice that has contributed to the Iona community's resilience over the past 9 decades, other communities have the opportunity to examine their own ritual practices to determine the effectiveness of their contribution to the community's resilience. They could ask questions like, what rituals do we already practice? Have we even identified what rituals we practiced? Are there ritual practices we could implement that could bring the community together in commonality while still holistically integrating differences? How can the community ensure all voices are heard? That they're not dominating or compromising, but actually integrating to create something new when conflict arises? What might be possible to ensure that rituals can be implemented without domination or compromise? So I'm a practical interdisciplinary researcher. Practical theology is actually in my PhD title, which I love because I'm very practical. I'm always asking myself, so why does this matter? Why might this research be of practical value? So there's a few things that we know to be true. We know that our world is in crisis. Right? There's no question about that. We see and experience those that are attempting to magnify crisis by emphasizing differences as the problem. That was forefront in the news in the UK just this past week. Rather than seeing differences as a valued aspect of community. We know that emphasizing difference as a problem results in destructive conflict rather than co-creative and generative conflict. Remember, conflict is present with us because differences are present. What we do with it is what makes the difference. We know that destructive conflict divides and isolates. We know that reported rates of isolation and loneliness, disconnection from community, is exploding globally. And we know that these exploding rates of isolation and loneliness are a direct contributor to the epidemic of mental health diagnoses that we're also experiencing globally. We know that individuals are longing for restorative, renewing ways to explore their faith and spirituality. We know that these individuals are looking for psychologically safe and relationally connected community contexts to do so. And I know this longing frequently underlies the curiosity that many have towards holistic, diverse, and inclusive communities like the Iona community. We know that faith practices and spiritual rituals, along with regular interaction rituals of communal daily life, if successful and restorative, generate communal connectedness and belonging. And we know that social connection and communal belonging are necessary for resilience. And community resilience is necessary for communities to flourish and thrive in a world defined by conflict, crisis, and change. So I want to bring this to a close before our Q&A with just a few questions for reflection. And these are questions that can come up during the Q&A if you would like, or they can just be questions that you can take with you for reflection later. Think of one ritual in your life that helps you feel connected to others or generates a sense of belonging in a group. And if you're the type of person to jot things down, maybe take some time to jot that down. take a few moments to consider how the rituals practiced within your group contribute to connectedness and belonging. How do the differences in the groups in which you're part affect the group's resilience? Do they affect it positively? Negatively? If positively, how can you encourage more of what's going well? If negatively, what could you do to help change that? And finally, after hearing what you've heard today, would you still define resilience the same way? Or do you think your definition would expand or shift? Before we go into our Q&A time, I just want to take a moment to say, as part of the charity work that my husband and I do, our focus is helping communities develop resilience. And one of the ways that we do that is through a 2.5-day, we call it a psychological first aid training, but it's actually holistic first aid training because it doesn't just cover psychological aspects. It covers psychological, emotional, physical, and spiritual. We're holding one in Edinburgh in September. You would all be invited to attend. There's a discount for UK residents. If you're interested, there's a flyer over there on the table, or you can find out more information on our website at theresilienceresource.org.uk. There are several people who have attended who have pointed to that training as being a significant contributor to how they're able to integrate into their communities and caring for others who are experiencing crisis and challenge in their lives. So we know that it's been quite helpful. But I'd love to just hear from you. What questions do you have? As you've listened to the past 50 minutes or so, what's popped to mind? Agree, disagree? I'm always open to challenge on my research. But I'd love to just start a dialogue. What questions do you have? And this is open to those online as well. If you want to pop your questions in the chat, we'd be happy to address those as those come in. It's always good when I've answered all the questions. Yeah. Hang on, Scott will bring the mic up so everybody online can hear as well. Oh, Scott, we had somebody up here first, and then we'll go to the back. Or Rolf. However. Juggle the mics. Thank you.
I was just reflecting in my own head about how some of the rituals that we practice are much wider than our own local communities, and so have that potential to reach out that connectedness across time and across space.
Yep.
So, and I'm just reflecting in my own head that could be something that's quite powerful. And did your research find that the kind of, you mentioned some very kind of, some like rituals that we might do on a day-to-day that are relatively new and relatively light, that probably might not have that kind of wider connection. Is there a difference between those things?
That's a great question. Yes and no is the short answer to that. The daily interactions that we experience with each other or with individuals on the street or those that we know are those little r rituals, which do have the potential to expand beyond our community, as do those big R rituals or the larger, more structured rituals that we practice. So interestingly enough, the resilience research talks about what they call bridging networks. So that's where your community or the group of people that you regularly connect with, you have your kind of sense of social cohesion and connectedness that's generated through your daily interactions and maybe your ritual practice. And you're not an island in and of yourself. Each of you has different networks that you connect to outside of maybe that group that you most commonly connect with. Those bridging networks also can contribute in really important ways to communal resilience, because those are places that resources can come from if a community is going through a crisis or experiencing a really challenging time. And vice versa, resources can go out to another community. And that relies on those relational connections that are connecting in kind of this interwoven web that reaches into all different areas of life. So as we go about just kind of our day-to-day, we're constantly in and out of different communal connections that we all are a part of in different ways. Does that help to? Okay. Yeah.
I was reflecting on your juxtaposition of, what do you do with conflict? Is it, do you resolve it by dominance? Is it compromise? Is it integration? I found that a little bit simplistic. There are things that can't be integrated very well, and where unless there is this give and take and the willingness to compromise and recognizing that not everybody can have everything that they would ideally like, and to me that is the most common way these things get resolved. Although increasingly what I see is that people let things slide and run in parallel for very long times. So where there is no attempt to dominate, compromise, or integrate, and it is literally just having parallel societies, parallel groups that somehow coexist, but without any proper linkages between them. So it's just, sort of reflecting to what degree I agree with that sort of, ranking of the three as optimal versus suboptimal solutions.
No, that's a really valid point, and absolutely fair. For the sake of time, the field of conflict research, whether you're looking at communities between individuals or within organizations, is its own discipline. So it's important to acknowledge that conflict that's avoided is conflict that's suppressed. So there is a level of compromise that somebody has to take to avoid conflict. They're suppressing some aspect of what they need. Now, when we're talking about conflict, we're talking about differences that arise just through the course of everyday life. I mean, this is outside the scope of violence. This is outside the scope of safety. So if there's a conflict that arises where safety is in question, well, then certainly there has to be a different conversation. It doesn't push it out of the domination, compromise, or integration conversation. It just builds that conversation out bigger. Because when your safety is in question, you still can create something new. And that's just because somebody doesn't like how their needs are met doesn't mean that their needs aren't met. So if somebody's attacking somebody else, well, they need to stop attacking somebody else, and that other person needs them to stop attacking somebody else. So something new can be created out of a need to maintain boundaries or create boundaries for the sake of safety. But you are exactly right. It is a high-level overview of conflict resolution that may or may not integrate into all aspects of life. It's an aspect of organizational cultural theory that helps us kind of understand as communities what we can do when we have different ideals and needs that need to move forward together, and what that can look like to do that in restorative ways. Very, very fair point. Yeah.
I was, going to ask along very similar lines. So because again, I found that just a bit too neat and tidy. But more specifically, do you think there are ways in which the ritual chains you've been talking about, ways in which we can use them to help us hold tension and dissonance, which do come when you can't just integrate or so on? And I'm just interested in how those things you've identified might specifically be employed as a way of helping us hold tension when there is tension, or manage dissonance when we can't resolve a difference. And I'm not talking now about obviously the kind of more extreme things which you highlighted, but just within a community like this, we aren't all going to agree. And we have to find ways of managing that, I think.
Yes, exactly right. I think that's the benefit to recognizing interaction ritual chains, and something that I think helps to even address the earlier question is that it's important to look at this kind of what do we do with conflict concept as not a time-bounded thing. You know, as people, we really want to fix things now, and we don't like things that are in tension or in dissonance. But first of all, life is messy. It doesn't fit in a formula. These are concepts then that can be stretched to fit a context. And anything can, particularly when it's relationally oriented, if you're working towards integration and co-creatively and collaboratively resolving conflict, that takes time. That's not something that one successful interaction ritual chain where you got together, you had coffee, you had a great feeling, you feel connected and belonging, all those things are generated, and now your conflict is resolved. That's by no means what the research is demonstrating. What it's demonstrating is what Collins emphasizes in the chains word. This is a compiling of interactions. So maybe an example might be at a kind of a simple interaction level. Say you're at the Abbey and you've just arrived and you maybe don't know all the people that are there. And you get up in the morning and you go up to the dining hall or the eating space for a cup of coffee, and you're getting your coffee or your tea and you're fixing it, and somebody comes up and they're just, kind of stiff, and you kind of look over at them and their body language is a little turned away from you, and they're kind of grumbling under their breath, and you hand them a cup of coffee or an empty cup to get their coffee, and thanks, and it's real brusque and abrupt. You've got ingredients for a successful interaction ritual chain to occur there, but you're missing that shared mood. You've got your co-presence, you've got your shared focus, you're both trying to create make a cup of coffee or a cup of tea, but you're just not on the same path here. You're there to connect and get started on your week, and somebody else is quite grumpy and obviously heading in a different way. Well, this is a very simplistic example to demonstrate that if later in the day you come across that person and they come up to you and they just go, I'm so sorry. I did not get good sleep last night. I was up most of the night. I got really rough news from work today. I know that I was abrupt and grumpy, and I just wanted to let you know that I apologize. Okay, well, then you have repair that's happened, right? Then the next day you see that person, they're more engaging, you have a few more successful interaction ritual chains. By the end of the week, you feel connected. You haven't agreed on everything, but you've had these experiences together that have generated a sense of cohesion together. Now, say you ran across this person later in the day and they were still brusque and abrupt. And maybe you start to think, well, is this just kind of how this person is? Is this me? Is this the experience here? And then maybe you run into somebody else who, maybe is kind of sharp and maybe just really direct about what they're telling you to do for your tasks for the day, and you start to go, gosh, I don't know about this. And you're enjoying the work and you're kind of, feeling like, that my time here is okay, but gosh, people around me I'm just not feeling very connected to them. And maybe you go through 2 or 3 days where you just feel like, well, gosh, this is kind of compiling. I don't feel connected to anybody. I don't really feel welcomed here. you're going to leave that week going, I had a lot in common with these people. We shared these values, but man, I really didn't connect relationally with people. I don't know what that looks like. And again, at a very simple level, that kind of demonstrates these are things that compile over time. You certainly can have an experience where something breaks and that relational connection is severed. And that is an unsuccessful interaction ritual chain that it's just done. Or it can build up over time, and the reverse can be true. And when you're talking about conflict resolution, you have the opportunity over time to integrate a solution. When you're looking at things over time, we know change occurs. All kinds of things can happen. Your wants and needs can change over time. It's a very complex, interrelated aspect that the interaction ritual chains only serve to emphasize or help us identify how we connect with others on a regular basis, what the consequences might be, and what we might need to do to repair a sense of disconnectedness, if we can, if it's within our capability to do so. I'm curious on your thoughts on that.
I can see how that works on an individual basis, but here we're also talking about individuals form a community.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think I'm interested in, will these rituals help us at the level of a community conflict or disagreement? Because that must also be where community resilience has to be found.
Yep. That's a great distinction. So maybe think about the last community meeting you had where you were really trying to wrestle through a significant issue. Maybe you're trying to make a decision as a community about something. Think about the dynamics in the room. Think about how people's voices were invited to share or contribute. Think about the sense of energy that was felt in the room, and then think about the sense of energy you took away from the room. Maybe think about what happened after that community meeting, the decisions maybe that the organization made. Did you feel like you were heard? Did that help to generate connectedness and belonging to the community? Did you feel like you were not heard? Maybe your voice was suppressed or set aside. Maybe there was a group of people that felt suppressed and set aside. Do they then now feel like their energy is depleted? If so, and if that's identified, well, then what does the community do about that? What does repair look like? Because if that sense of depleted energy within the community continues, and that sense of suppression of voice, or an organization's just going to do whatever they want to do anyway, why does it even matter if I contribute? Eventually, that sense of community will dissipate, and that community will collapse. It's so much more about what happens and what you do with conflict. How those successful interaction ritual chains within group gatherings can generate social cohesion. And again, when you're talking about a community gathering together and wrestling with an issue, that's when that conversation about domination, compromise, and integration has to get bigger. Because you're right, it's not an easy process. You have to determine, do the group's wants and needs change? Is that compromise? If they change, is that actually integration? We're creating something new. And how you can identify that is measurable. What happens to the group's energy? Do they still feel cohesive? If they don't, what are we going to do about it? Because if they don't feel cohesive, if they don't feel connected to each other, that will affect their communal resilience. That's one up here. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so the question I have relates to your comments about we can magnify crisis by emphasizing difference as the problem. And I think we can all think about examples in relatively recent history where conflict has happened, like global conflict has happened in that place. And also the world feels like it's very much like that in part now and we think of leaders that would emphasize difference and magnify problems. And I'm wondering, with all of your work, if you've been able to rationalize that at all. So one assumes that these leaders are not dumb. So why do they do it?
That's just such a great question. Rationalize it? No. It continues to be the pursuit of power, which is successful for a period of time, which generates additional pursuit of power. But eventually, as history shows us, communities, civilizations that pursue power collapse. They don't remain resilient. But it's successful in the moment for that person who's dominating and gets what they want. So Collins talks a bit about, in his power theory, about the amount of emotional energy that the dominating person receives from an interaction ritual. And those that are subordinate or have to be compliant to the dominant person certainly have their energy depleted. But because the dominant person, they also have social power, they have social capital, they receive that energy, well, then they just go do it more. Because now they're feeling that collective effervescence. They're feeling that. Rationalize, no. Observe how it's happening. That might be more of an accurate statement. It's not rational. It's horribly destructive. But because of the charge they get, I can see why they continue to do it and pursue it. Yeah.
I have a couple from online.
Sure.
First one is, was there anything in your research on the IC that did not cohere with what you might have expected or perhaps thought you might find? Any surprises?
Yes, actually, very early on, there was quite the surprise because I think I was in maybe my 4th or 5th interview before I realized that the term accountability in the rule does not mean judgment and consequences. So it was being used by everybody, this accounting, we're accountable to each other, but I grew up in middle America, highly conservative, highly evangelical Christianity. Accountability is in no way restorative. Accountability is in no way relational. Accountability is always dominating. So, boy, did I have to rework my concepts. And that's part of the benefit to researcher reflexivity and actually the methodology that I'm using in my research is that it really encourages that. It encourages a conversation with those that I'm interviewing, that I'm connecting with, to learn more about how things are defined for you, for the community, and reframe my perspective if something comes up that shifts things for me. And then once I realized that, oh, wait, the accounting is actually a restorative process. Not perfect, nothing's perfect, but it's meant to be restorative. It's meant to be reflective. It's meant to be relational and connecting in a way that continues to build that connection over time. It's not just a one and done, and it's integrated into all of life. So yes, that was quite the surprise for me. And then I had to go back over my earlier interviews and go, whoa, wait, I was looking at this totally wrong, and had to restructure some things. So yeah.
Here's another one. What about when differences can't be integrated? And this is similar to some of the others. For example, a difference where an individual or a group believes something that will oppress the other individual or group within the community.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's such an important factor to think about when we're looking at social cohesion, when we're looking at community development. I think it's also important to add here, not everybody will remain in a community. And it's not always best for the community's resilience for everybody to remain. There are times when it's actually more helpful for a community's resilience and that individual's resilience for them to be a part of a different community, where there's maybe an increased chance that those successful interaction ritual chains will occur and they can feel that sense of social cohesion and connectedness. And if you're really at a point where somebody's beliefs or differences are actually marginalizing or oppressing other people in the group, they have stepped into that dominant position. And that creates a lack of safety. So there's something that we've told our kids pretty much the entire time they were growing up, the drawback to them having a crisis care professionals as parents, is that our home has to be safe for everyone. So if you're treating me poorly, there are going to be boundaries I'm going to be setting because our house is safe for everyone here. You're not going to like the boundaries I set in place. You're not going to think they meet your needs. But because this house has to be safe for everyone, these are the boundaries that we have to put in place. Now, the same thing goes for community. A community has to be a safe place for those that are a part of the community. And if there's somebody that repeatedly over time continues to dominate to the point that it's creating unsuccessful ritual chains for somebody else, they're getting a charge out of it, but everybody else is being depleted around them, then that's no longer a safe environment, honestly, for them either. Because when we continue to step into a dominating position, we actually dehumanize ourselves. In order to dominate other people, we have to see them as less than. We have to see them as less valuable than us. We have to see them as less human as us, because we see ourselves as more than. And the more that we continue to dominate, the more that we dehumanize others. The psychological research continues to show that we dehumanize ourselves. And we actually cause harm to ourselves. So creating safety for somebody who's dominating may mean, I'm sorry, you can no longer do that here. Because in order for you to be able to stop dehumanizing other people, or for us to create safety for them, in order for you to stop dehumanizing yourself, we have to set boundaries in place, hopefully, that will cause you to realize this is a practice that is causing harm, holistically causing harm to you and others. May or may not. Everybody's choices are up to them. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being with us and sharing with us. I wondered about the importance of symbol along with ritual. Working with trauma children in Zurich, I trained with the Iona Institute. I saw the importance of symbol in terms of healing, but also I find it's good in terms of groups. So I just wondered if you thought the same.
No, I'm glad you brought that up because we just really skimmed over symbols, and symbols are a really interesting aspect to ritual practice and interaction rituals. Symbols help to ground us. They help to generate a sense of commonality. When we have in-group language, there's actually an embodied sense of I'm with people where I belong, because everything about what you're doing and interacting with each other says, oh, we've got these similarities. So that's where that in-group language can be a sacred symbol. When somebody has a symbol that is safe for them, particularly for traumatized children, if it's something tangible that they can hang on to, that maybe is a reflection of a new possibility of hope for the future for them, that's a really vital component to their resilience. And interestingly, this also goes back to our discussion about conflict, because conflict is not just generated through differences, it's also generated in difference of how we see sacred symbols and how we act towards them. And if we feel like our sacred symbols have been violated, then we will react, typically angrily, or we will emotionally react if we feel like our sacred symbols have been violated. So when you think about anything being a sacred symbol and how the violation of a sacred symbol can generate conflict, then it helps you to maybe understand a little bit more about where conflict arises, because you can actually trace that conflict to what that person or individual believes is a sacred symbol, because their emotional reaction tells you that it is. So think about the traumatized children that you work with. If they lost something that was sacred to them, or if another child tried to take it, wow, what happens? Not good things, right? It goes south in a hurry. So those sacred symbols are a really central part of considering what contributes to communities' resilience or an individual's resilience, and really important. And honestly, just for the sake of time, there was so much we could have talked about tonight, and not everything that we got to. But when you're considering within a community what cohesion looks like, what conflict resolution looks like, it can be really helpful to evaluate what the sacred symbols of the group are, and maybe how decisions that are being made might violate something that the group feels is a sacred symbol, and then what to do about that. Sometimes you don't have a choice. Sometimes the process of whatever's happening within the organization or the community means that that sacred symbol needs to be removed, or that sacred symbol is lost. But then there has to be an acknowledgement of the emotion that's connected with that. The grief process, the anger that might erupt, what might happen to the group's sense of social connectedness and cohesion if that sacred symbol has to be removed. It's really central to the conversation about communal resilience.
Just one more, Josie, maybe?
Yeah. We have one here, yeah?
Thank you. I'm just wondering, we've been talking about resilience of communities, and regularly we're saying, where are the young people? How do we involve them? And many groups have been struggling, particular communities, particularly since COVID, when the ability to meet has affected them. Yeah. And there have been a number of things that have really inspired the young people. So climate change, the anti-racist march is where we see it. And I look around this room and I look at our age profile, and I wonder to what extent is age and relevance an issue, because I think that for the young people, they're not coming to, many of the groups I'm part of as well. And I'm wondering to what extent that that plays a part in all this as well.
It does to some degree. It really only plays a part if we consider our group boundaries and what defines our group boundaries as rigid and inflexible. So if we think of our group boundaries as maybe defined by age or socioeconomic status, and we don't offer the opportunity for somebody outside that boundary to actually participate in communal life and have the opportunity of generating successful interaction ritual chains, they won't feel connected to the community, they won't return. If we can open our group boundaries, or help communicate that our group boundaries are not defined by something that's tangible and visible, maybe they're defined by practice. Within the Iona community, one of the group boundaries is the rule of life. That is boundaried practice. If you're not practicing the rule of life, then there might be a conversation about whether or not you want to remain a member, because that's one of the group boundaries. Now, we might assume that our group boundaries are a lengthy list of things, and they might not be. Those might not be our boundaries at all. They might actually be something else that we're communicating to other people is a boundary to their inclusion. So it's worth communities considering, are we communicating a boundary we don't intend to communicate? Where are we opening our doors to people to experience communal life, for them to experience those those successful interaction ritual chains that lead to social cohesion? Is there something that we're doing that's causing an unsuccessful interaction ritual chain where people actually leave an experience with us or an interaction with us feeling depleted and disconnected? Because what the research keeps showing is that it doesn't matter age, status, race. If you have a successful interaction ritual chain, and again, chains are those compiled over time, successful interaction ritual after successful interaction ritual after successful interaction ritual, there will be a measurable sense of social cohesion and connectedness. Full stop. So if there's unsuccessful interaction ritual chains happening, something has to be creating a barrier there, a boundary there. And it may not be what you assume it to be at first glance. But what we can know is that when people are welcomed into communal life and those successful interaction ritual chains are generated, that does create a sense of connectedness and belonging. And as long as those continue to be generated, it will create a sense of social cohesion, which then creates communal resilience. Yeah?
Why is it not happening? Why are all groups of our age dying? So I hear the theory, but we're still not relevant.
They may be communicating, or your groups may be communicating. I'll say it again. So he's just said, why is that happening? Then why, he hears the theory, but why are these groups that he's a part of dying? And my encouragement would be to consider what boundary might be being communicated to young people. Do they actually feel welcomed in? Are there opportunities for them to participate in the communal life of those groups? More than a booth at a festival? Is there an opportunity for actually a conversation to be had? Is that initiated by people in the group, or is it expected that young people will come to the group and join? There's all kinds of elements of communal life or boundaries that can be created that might not be what we think they are. But it does rely on our willingness to assess what we're communicating that we might not realize we're communicating. But the bottom line is, if a community is dying or a community is aging out, there's cohesion in that group, but they're not communicating a sense of welcome, and they're not generating successful interaction ritual chains. So then the group has to ask themselves why that's happening. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Rob.
It's always good to stop with a question. Because it gives you the sense that we have just entered into this conversation. I see some of you having edged closer to the edge of your seat, which means we're engaging in something that really matters to us. Josie, I want to say a heartfelt thank you for inviting us into this interactive conversation. You have done something quite unenviable, come alongside a community and really felt our pulse. And you've made some remarkable discoveries and then put them alongside some beautiful concepts such as social, what was that fizziness word that you used?
Collective effervescence.
Social effervescence. I will wake up in the middle of the night remembering that. I also think of a social ritual interaction when I think of a Glasgow bus queue. And you just stand there waiting for a bus. And those of you who are Glaswegians may know this. Those who aren't, you may want to experience this. By the time the bus comes, you know the person next to you's life story. And that's been an effective social interaction ritual chain. Thank you for not shying away from the complexities of this conversation. Thank you for opening the book to your amazing research that I know you're in the middle of writing up, and it causes some degree of angst because there's a deadline looming that is not so far away. but it's all the more reason to say thank you for coming and spending your time with us tonight. I have a sense this may be the beginning of a conversation that's been going on for almost 90 years, but you've just taken us over the threshold of something new. And I know from our conversations in preparing this lecture that you are ready and willing to continue in dialogue with us, and that excites me most. That this is not just a one-off event, but that this is an ongoing conversation. And my hope is, as we continue in plenary tomorrow and throughout the year, that some of the thoughts that you have kick-started in us might come back, and we might say, that, and this is how that connects with, and this is what question this stirs up in me. Josie, we are deeply grateful for you being here and giving the 2026 Iona Community Lecture. I invite you to say thank you to Josie. Thank you.
Josie, thank you again. And yes, as Rolf said, let's continue the conversation. But first of all, that research and the writing up.
Do you have to submit my dissertation?
We're with you in spirit.
Thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure. And also, Scott, thank you for being with us. Just before you leave, the next thing on our agenda, if you're coming back tomorrow, is the doors open at 9:30, and we then have worship at 10, and the morning and the day will flow from there. As you're leaving, and this is a foretaste for tomorrow, this little gallery display on my left is a collection of the projects that the second year new members have been working on. So please take some time to peruse these projects. I was going to say saving the best till last. I'm not going to do that. They're all equal. Over here, there are resources. Please take these resources. They're there for you to share in your family groups, in your regions, in your churches, on those buses. Create new ritual chains with that. And then, behind Meg, over here, is a little collection of Camas goodies. I'm just going to say, Liz, do you want to say what's there?
Thanks, Ruth. There's a selection of things there tonight. There's a down-the-track book. There's a variety of crafts from different people have contributed, and there's more coming tomorrow. So there's a few things here, but if you've looked, do come back and have another look tomorrow. Thank you.
So all proceeds go towards...
Sorry, and I've also, Wendy gave me a whole lot of leaflets, extra leaflets. If anybody would like to take a few away, we don't want to use too much paper, but if you've got places you can take them, I've got a whole bundle of leaflets and some of the bigger ones as well. They're free to take away to publicise Camas Companions.
So farewell, good night, sleep well, and we'll see you back here in the morning.